Okay. So that in this session, it's only with the students or also the optometrist?
No, only students.
Yeah, fine. So I think the students can ask their doubts in between the session itself. So if they
Yeah.
are having any doubts, they can have their question in the chat box so that I
Yeah.
can answer them in between the session. Okay.
Ah, sure.
Okay. Shall we start with that?
Yeah, we'll start.
So just a minute. I'm sharing my screen.
I think I will
Siddharth,
have
can you?
to make you
Yeah.
the host. Yeah, I think you can now.
Yeah. Just a minute. Can you able to see the screen?
Yeah, yeah, we can.
Yeah, fine. Good afternoon, everyone. So here I am going to discuss about the advancement in the IOL designs and a few things which you want to look for the before cataract and after cataract workup. So here I'm just had a short intro on the IOLs. So if you take the IOL market, so the IOLs it was started in the year 1949 by Dr. Harold Ridley, who was first implanted the posterior chamber IOL in the year of 1949. So after Harold Hitley, many of the doctors are not practiced posterior chamber lens for the 3 years. So in the year of 1952, Dr. Boron, a French scientist and a doctor, who implanted the anterior chamber lens. So after Dr. Boron's experiment, so many of the doctors started doing anterior chamber lens from the year of 1952 till 1980. It was a vast experience of anterior chamber lenses. So after in the year of 1955, Dr. Carolinius Bincrost from Netherlands started doing a lens which is supported by the iris. So from 1955 till 1980, it was used in various countries like US and then Italy, Spain, most of Western countries. So in the year of 1975, Dr. John Pierce from England was the one who implanted the posterior chamber lens. So after which the entire IOL market is changed. So after that, many of the companies or many of the doctors started using the posterior chamber lens more than the anterior chamber lens or the iris supporter lens. So before explaining about the each IOL design, I just want to explain you about the parts of the IOL. So mostly the IOL will be consisting of two major parts. First part is the optic, which carries the entire refractive part of the lens. So if you take the IOL, it will have two major parts. One is the optic and the next one is the haptic. So the haptic is the one which supports the optic towards the eye. So whenever the doctor implanting the lens inside the eye, the haptic is the one which supports the lens, IOL lens inside the patient's eye. And the few terminologies which is main thing which you want to look on the IOL is the edge design. Edge design of the IOL is very important because the edge design of the lens only the edge design of the lens it's mostly depends on the two categories. One is the sharp edge and another one is the square edge. So these two edges will adhere the lens inside the posterior chamber bag. So that will stop the migration of the epithelial cells, which mostly ends up with the PCO. So most of the lenses will comes with the square edge or the sharp edge, so that the lens epithelial cells will not migrate posterior to the IOL, so which will result in the PCO. And then the vaulting. So most of the lenses will have the vaulting angle. So mainly the vaulting angle will be from 0 degree, maximum it will tends up to 5 degree. So many of the IOLs will come with a 5 degree vaulting. So this 5 degree vaulting is mainly because of whenever we are implanting a posterior chamber IOL, so the lens with the vaulting angle, it will rest in the eye very well. So if the vaulting angle is minimum, the lens will get will be supported with the help of any iris or with the help of the ciliary sulcus. Okay, so here is the IOL. Here you can see this is a front view of an IOL. In this IOL, this is the optic and this is the haptic. So if you take this session, so you can see this is the optic, and the edging will be in the junction between the optic and the haptic. You can see the square edge here. So the square edge or the sharp edge will be 360 degree. That is the entire optic and the haptic junction will be have this edging. And then if you can see here is the 5 degree. If you see there is a bending of the haptic from the optic. So this is known as the vaulting angle. Okay. So one main thing about the IOL is all the IOLs which are coming now or comes with the optic diameter of 6 mm. But the entire diameter of the lens varies, depends on the haptic. Either it is a 2 haptic lens or a 4 haptic lens. So the entire diameter of the IOL varies, depends on the haptic design. Okay. So here you can see the different vaulting angle. So if you see here, there is a no bending of the haptic from the optic. So this is a 0 degree vaulting in which the lens can be supported with the ciliary sulcus. So this is a offset optics, offset haptics. Mostly these also will be supported by the either ciliary sulcus or the zonals. So this is a 5 degree vaulting lens in which the this angulated lens is very well placed in the posterior chamber bag. Sorry. Yeah. So here comes the edge design. I already told you about the square edge. This is a square edge and this is a sharp edge. So these are the lens epithelial cells which will migrate after implanting an IOL. So mainly if a lens having a square edge has a low tendency to the epithelial cell growth, so which results in the low rate of PCO. But the lens with a sharp edge will have a lot of epithelial cell migration which ends up in PCO. So mostly the IOL is classified based on these 4 main parts. So one thing is the position of the lens. So mostly the position of the lens will be in the anterior chamber or the posterior chamber or the iris supported lens or the ciliary sulcus. So next come the haptic design. The haptic design will be the 2 haptic design and the 4 haptic, haptic design will be in the, it will be a loop design or it is a plate haptic. So haptic design will be of 2 types. One is the plate haptic, another one is the loop haptic design. So next is the material. So mostly the IOL, nowadays the IOL market is mainly based on the material of the IOL, because the material of the IOL have a huge impact on the rate of PCO. So if you take a IOL, the material is of 3 different types. One is the hydrophobic and the hydrophilic. The third part is the copolymer. Copolymer is nothing but the mixture of hydrophilic and then hydrophobic. Then the 4th point is the number of haptic. So mostly the IOL nowadays are coming with a 2 haptic design or a 4 haptic design. So each type I will explain you in the picture. So first thing I am explaining the position of the lens. You can see here the position of the lens. These 2 lenses are anterior chamber IOL. So here you can see the 2 haptic lens which is positioned in the anterior chamber. This lens is known as Kelman multiflex type IOL. So you can see a flexible haptic design, so which they can place very easily in the anterior chamber. And this type of IOL they can even place in a angle closure patient. So it will not have a huge impact on angle closure. So here is the iris fixated lens. Actually you can see a lens. Actually it will be placed behind the iris, not in front of the iris. So behind the iris it will be placed like this, and haptic will be the plate haptic. This is a plate haptic lens. So in the plate haptic, the haptic, there is really a loop. So inside the loop, they will fix the iris with the help of a suture. So you can this is actually a seeing worst iris claw lens. So then the position of the lens. I told you about the patient who had a trauma. You can take a blunt trauma. So in which the ciliary zones will be very weak, so that the posterior chamber also will be very weak. So in that case, the doctor will place the lens in the ciliary sulcus. Here you can see this is the posterior chamber bag. But since the ciliary zonules are weak, the lens is placed in the ciliary sulcus. This is the ciliary body and this is the ciliary sulcus. So most of the traumatic cataract cases, the doctor will place the IOL in the ciliary sulcus. So this is depends on the haptic design. So here you can see different types of loop. This is actually a two haptic design. Here also you can say there is a multi-piece lens, single piece lens, and the plate haptic. So multi-piece is nothing but the optic is of a different material, the haptic is of different material. This is known as a multi-piece IOL. So in case of a single piece IOL, both the haptic and the optic be in the same material. So next comes the plate style, in which the optic and the haptic will be of the same plate. There will be no distinction difference between the optic and haptic. It will be in the same design. Then next comes the number of haptic. So here you can see a 2 haptic lens design and a 4 haptic lens design. So mostly doctors, many of the doctors, they are using the 2 haptic design. Even few doctors nowadays, they are started using the 4 haptic design because of the stability inside the posterior chamber bag. So many doctors nowadays, they are moving to a 4 haptic lens. So on material, I'm telling about the important advantages and disadvantages. So mostly the IOL material is of hydrophilic, hydrophobic. So mostly nowadays PMMA material or silicone material they are not using, since because they are having a high rate of inflammation, and also the posterior chamber opacification. The PCO rate is very high in PMMA material. But in cases of hydrophilic and hydrophobic, so nowadays many doctors they are using hydrophobic material since the PCO rate is very low. But in case of hydrophilic, even though the lens is very soft and the lens is very foldable, the PCO rate, the epithelial cells migration will be more in hydrophilic material than the hydrophobic. So what happens, many MNCs like even my company, if you take a SIFI from Italy, so it is coming with a material called a copolymer, in which there will be a combination of both hydrophilic part and hydrophobic part. So in which the hydrophilic part will be used as a for the foldable material in the lens. The hydrophobic part is for the PCO reduction. Siddharth, is I'm going fast or is it okay?
No, the face is good.
Siddharth?
Sorry, just a second. The face is good. You can keep proceeding.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
So now I'm going since nowadays many patients and many doctors they are moving on for the multifocal lenses. I'm just giving an idea about how the multifocal lenses are evolving nowadays. So if you take many of the multifocal lenses are using the diffractive optics. So if you take the multifocal lens, the optic will have a lot of rings. So since there will be a lot of rings, the bending of light will be more. So there will be patients started complaining of photic phenomenon. If you take a photic phenomenon, is nothing but the glare, halos. Whenever the patient is driving a car at the night time, they will feel a lot of glare whenever they are driving. So many of the doctors even are not happy with the diffractive optics. Even though the vision will be very good for distance, intermediate and near, the patient satisfaction will be very less in diffractive optics. And the adaptation, the brain adapting to the lens is taking a longer time in a diffractive lens than the other multifocal lenses. And also the image jump phenomena, usually you can see this in bifocal glasses actually. So even in a diffractive lens, whenever the patient is not keeping the material at the particular distance, or they are not having a proper head movement, they are experiencing this image jump. So here, these are the photic phenomenon which the patient can see after implanting a diffractive lens. So the neural adaptation, the patient will have a lot of confusion and whether they are seeing it clear or not. So it's the thing. So this is a diffractive lens. Here you can see this is a slit lamp picture. This is the diffractive lens, multifocal lens, which have a lot of concentric rings. So after a few years of diffractive lens, the lens design slightly changed to a refractive optics. Refractive optic is nothing but the lens will not have a diffractive rings. Instead, they are having a segment or a zone. We usually we call it as a zone. So this is a lens in which there will be a refractive element. The entire optic is 6 mm, in which the center 1 mm will have this refractive element. So because of this refractive element, the lens will have a two different focus. One is since the 1 mm refractive zone is on the nearby axis, that is a paraxis. So the focus will be little longer. So that will give the near vision, and then this peripheral zone is for the distance vision. So in these lenses, the doctor and the patient feels there will be a reduced photic phenomenon, but there will be but the studies are there in which the studies show there will be even though this refractive lenses, the photic phenomena will be there, but not that much when compared to the diffractive lens. And in these cases, the neural adaptation is little faster, and the patient will have a clear range of vision. Even though the patient is keeping the book or their laptop at a particular distance, they can see it very clearly. But in case of diffractive lens, whenever the patient is keeping at that particular distance, then they can see it very clear. And in the refractive lenses nowadays, these IOLs are having an increasing trend. We call it as a EDOF lens. EDOF is nothing but the extended depth of focus. So if you take these lenses, most of these lenses using the spherical aberration. So many EDOF lenses nowadays, actually nearly around 4 to 5 EDOF lenses are there in the market, in which the nearly 3 lenses are using spherical aberration for giving this extended depth of focus. But in this extended depth of focus lenses, the number of focus of the lens are infinite. Here I will give you some pictures. Yeah. So I am showing a picture now which gives the comparison between a refractive IOL and the EDOF IOL. So you can see here, this is the diffractive lens, and this is the back side of the diffractive lens. You can see the each refractive ring will have a sharp edge, so that the bending of light will be more, and then the patient will have a different focus, one for near and one for far, like that. So you can see here, this is a near focal point and this is a far focal point in a diffractive lens. This is actually a refractive, which is nothing but a EDOF IOL. Here you can see from here till here, it's a extended depth of focus. So there will be a number of small focus which are combined together we call it as a extended depth of focus. In these cases, the patient will not have a confusion of the image, because each number of focus will be adjacent to it, so that the brain accepts the image as a single image. The patient will not have a confusion while perceiving the image. So here showing the difference between monofocal lens. This is a monofocal lens which have a single focus. This is a multifocal lens which is nothing but the diffractive lens will have this near focus and then the distance focus. But in cases of a EDOF lens, this is a EDOF lens. Symphony. Symphony is the company. This is a Johnson & Johnson company refractive lens, in which you can see a elongated focus. Here you can't count the number of focus. So starting from starting from here till here, it will have an n number of focus. So mostly when our patient is coming inside our clinic, as an optometrist, we are the one which who are taking the history. So I think the history taking part is a major thing before a cataract surgery. Nowadays, since the patients they are started moving to multifocal lenses, so the main thing what we want to ask to the patient is very, very important. So the first main thing what we are asking is their need. So the need of the patient. So mostly you want to ask the patient's occupation. So nowadays many of the patients, even though they are having household work or they are housewives, they are on computers or they are on their mobile phone or tabs. So a major thing is we want to ask for their needs, and next to the need is the ocular trauma. Since many multifocal IOLs are even both diffractive or refractive IOLs, they are having their own inclusion and exclusion criteria. So if you take the exclusion criteria, the first point will be the ocular trauma, because many of these multifocal IOLs are multifocal IOLs are designed in the way that they are only placed in the posterior chamber bag. So in that case, the ocular trauma you want to be very keen of. So you want to ask about the ocular trauma, and you want to ask about the other ocular complications. So many of the multifocal IOLs, they are implanted only when the patient is not having a retinal disorders, and the patient who are not having any genetical disorders like RP or any other retinal disorders. And also in some cases, a patient who are undergone LASIK, they are also not acceptable for the multifocal lenses. But nowadays, even post-LASIK patients, they can undergo a refractive IOL than a diffractive IOL, because post-LASIK patient, their eyes higher order version will be more. But in case of a diffractive lens, if you implanted a diffractive lens in a patient who are having a higher order aberration more, in that case, the patient will have a lot of visual disturbances. So in that case, you can go for a refractive IOL. So the main thing is you can ask for the ocular surgeries and then the ocular complications. So next come the dryness. So why dryness is important? Because you can take before our cornea, the tear film plays a major role, even for our normal lacrimation of the eye, and also for the refraction. So if the patient is not having a proper tear film, in that case, the IOL, especially the multifocal IOLs, will not work properly. So if the patient is having a history of dryness, so before implanting a multifocal IOL, he should be treated at least for 3 months. Then the pupil size. So pupil size plays a major role in a multifocal IOL. So most of the multifocal IOLs are pupil dependent. So the pupil size plays a major role even before the surgery and after the surgery. So most of the IOLs are designed in a way such that the pupil size will not less than 2.75. If the pupil size is very small, then the patient is not eligible for the multifocal lenses. So most of the patients should be measure the pupil size both of scotopic and photopic. In some cases, we are also need the mesopic pupil size. So we want to measure each photopic, mesopic, and scotopic pupil size before the IOL implantation, so that the patient will have a clear vision after the surgery. Then the refractive error prior to the surgery, because of refractive error prior to the surgery is very, very important in case, because if the biometry readings, if anything changes in the biometry reading, then you want to look for the refractive error. Because even though the patient is implanting a multifocal lenses, in some cases after surgery, the patient will end up with a refractive error, either for distance or for near. So in that cases, you want to look for the refractive error prior to the surgery. So here is a picture in which the patient had a traumatic cataract, in which you can see the coronals are stretched and the lens is slightly dislocated. So in this case, we will not advise for the multifocal lenses. Instead, the patient can go for a SF IOL, that is sulcus fixing IOL. So in this case, the IOL will be fixed in the ciliary sulcus. So as an optometrist, our major part is in the doing the biometry. So biometry is very, very important for calculating the IOL power. So biometry mostly it is comprising of 3 major categories. One is the keratometry, then the A-scan, and then the IOL power calculation. Okay. So these are the main few clinical conditions in which you can have a difference in the axial length values, and these are challenging cases also in which you can see in the normal OPDs. So one is the nanophthalmus, which is a congenital condition in which the axial length is less than 18 mm. You can normally find out the nanophthalmus by seeing the cornea, because the cornea will be small, microcornea will be there. That choroid and the sclera will be very, very thick, and the patient will have a high hyperopia. But in case of axial myopia, most of the axial lengths will be greater than 25 mm. In axial myopia, you can expect the patient will have a posterior staphyloma also. So the before implanting a IOL for an axial myopia patient, the retinal evaluation is very important, and to look for any RDs or any retinal tears or retinal disorders. But in axial myopia, the corneal and the lens curvature will be normal. And then the narrow angles. So most of the narrow angles average anterior chamber depth is 3.15, but the anterior chamber shallows by 0.01 mm per year. Actually, if you take after 40 years of age, slowly the anterior chamber is will be short each and every year. Even though if the cataract develops, if from grade 1 to grade 4, so the lens slowly pushes the anterior chamber forward, so which also cause the narrow angles. And even though a few special cases are there in biometry, while taking biometry, one is the spirophakia, microspirophakia, and another one is the for some oculoplastic condition also they will ask for the axial values actually. So in a spirophakia, the lens thickness, actually the anterior posterior thickness will be more. In cases of microspirophakia, the anterior posterior lens thickness will be very high. So in that case, the axial length will be little more. So in that case, you want to be very careful. You will not get confused with the spirophakia and then the myopia, axial myopia. For oculoplasty, why they are asking for axial length is nothing but whenever the patient is going for a ball implant or a socket implant, in that case, they will do the axial length evaluation in the fellow eye for the reference, and then they will implant the socket in the affected eye. So these are the different types of keratometer which we are following in our OPD practice in all centers. So mostly there are three type of keratometer they are doing. So one is the manual keratometer, which ranges from 36 diopter to 52 diopters. All the both the manual keratometer and then the handheld auto keratometer will measure the central 3 mm of cornea. Most of the conditions, even the doctors, they are going for this manual keratometer, since if patient is having any kind of a corneal surface disorders, it can easily pick up in a manual keratometer by seeing the Myers. So this is the gold standard for an IOL calculation, manual keratometer. Auto keratometer, we can do it for pediatric cases and the patient who can't fixate well and who are bedridden patients. Then here nowadays the modern trend is many of the doctors, they are going for this topography modeling system, which is nothing but the corneal topographer pentacam, in which it will give the full range of from 9 diopter till 101 diopter it can measure. And in few conditions like pentacam, the area measured will be both anterior and the posterior cornea. Even though if the manual keratometer and then the auto keratometer will give only the anterior corneal curvature and the anterior corneal astigmatism, but in cases of a pentacam, if you take a reading, it will give both the anterior corneal curvature and also the posterior corneal curvature, so that we can have an idea how the posterior cornea also giving the magnitude of how much amount of astigmatism. So topography system they are using in a irregular astigmatism cases, which is nothing but the oblate corneas, and the patient who are undergone LASIK or any kind of LASIK, either hyperopic LASIK or myopic LASIK or even epi-LASIK, they can do topography modeling systems, and the patient who are having corneal scar or pterygium. And most of the whenever we are implanting a multifocal IOLs, many doctors are going for a topography modeling system, since it's giving both the anterior corneal curvature and posterior corneal curvature, because of premium IOL is nothing but the multifocal IOL. So the main thing the patient is going for multifocal IOL is after surgery they are not want to use glasses. So in that case, what happens? The doctor is mostly they rely on this topography system than the manual keratometer or auto keratometer. So main things, whenever you are taking a keratometer reading, the main things you want to remember, you want to repeat the keratometry value if it is less than 40 diopter or if it is greater than 47 diopter. For a cross check, you want to repeat the keratometer values. And if the corneal cylinder between two eyes, if a right eye you are taking a 43 diopter and a left eye if it's going beyond 45 or 44, then you want to repeat the keratometer values and to check for to recheck whether the values are correct or not. And also, whenever you want to check this corneal cylinder with your refraction, with your pre-op refraction, to check for how much refraction you are getting in the retinoscope, so that you can calculate whether how much astigmatism is because of cornea and how much is the internal astigmatism. So a few points on keratometer is that measurement should be same even after the patient blinks, because most of the keratometer is works on the principle of corneal reflections. So mostly after the patient blinks, the value should be the same. It will not, if it is for each and every time, if the patient after blink, if the values going to differ, then you want to repeat the keratometer values. And the patient who is having an excess tearing, which is nothing but the epiphora, will have a variation in the reading. So in that case, you want to clean their eyes, and then you can, in that case, you can go for a topography system for mapping their cornea. And the main thing in the keratometer value is, if you are making an error of 1 diopter in a keratometer reading, so after the surgery, the patient will end up with a 1 diopter of refractive error. So it is very, very important that you want to make a clear, crisp keratometer value before the cataract surgery. Then the axial length measurement. So axial length measurement is very, very important in calculating the IOL power. So if you take the axial length measurement, there are 3 different types in which the axial length measurement was done. One is the ultrasound A scan, then the immersion technique, then the non-contact method. But mostly nowadays, the doctors are practicing this non-contact method, which is there are several machines are there. I'm just put up 3 machines. One is the Zeiss IOL Master, then the Nidec, then the LensStar. So these 3 machines are using the infrared light, in which the axial length is measured. But in case of ultrasound A scan and immersion technique, it will use the ultrasound waves to measure the axial length. I'm giving a few reports in which you can differentiate an ultrasound report and the non-contact method report. This is an ultrasound scan report in which you can see the spikes. So usually these spikes will report, it will be in the ultrasound scan. Both in ultrasound and immersion, you can see the report will be like this. So here there are several spikes which gives an idea. This is a cornea, then anterior lens capsule. This is the posterior cornea. This is the anterior lens capsule, posterior lens capsule. Starting at the from this is RP and this is the internal limiting membrane. So mostly this ultrasound they will give until the RP. In some cases they will give till the sclera also. But in cases of a non-contact method, it will not show any kind of spikes. Instead, they will give all the readings. Here you can see it will give the axial length and the anterior chamber depth. This is the keratometer value which they are given radius of curvature, which is nothing but. And also in the Nidec scan, you can see 2 radius of curvature, which is nothing but in here 2.4 mm of cornea it is measuring. Here it is measuring 3.3 mm of the cornea. And also here you can see a different IOL formulas. So within one click you can get all the values in case of a non-contact method. But in case of a contact method like ultrasound or an immersion technique, you want to calculate on your own, or in some machines they are having their own calculations. So this is a Zeiss IOL Master report. Here also you can see it will give how much cylinder is there, difference between the K1 and K2 values, and axial length it will give, and also K1, K2. This is nothing but the spherical equivalent, the average of 2 keratometer values. And also it gives whether the eye is a phakic eye or it is a pseudo-phakic eye, or in some cases the patient may undergo retinal surgery. In that case, they will have a silicone oil injection also. So you want to select an option in the biometric machine itself. Siddharth?
And I think
Siddharth, I think the session is going to end.
Is going to end. I think we can restart it again. So I just so that I
Yeah,
just
thank
want
you.
to Okay, I think Anand, you can share your screen now.
Yeah, just a minute, Siddharth.
Yeah.
Sorry. Mm, Yeah, fine. Can I start, Siddharth, or I want to wait?
We'll just wait for 30 seconds so that
Yeah,
everyone
fine,
can
Siddharth.
join.
Fine, Siddharth.
I think you can explain this Jay's part alone again so that they will get the continuity.
Yeah, fine,
So that
Siddharth.
we can have
Okay,
a good flow over when we start explaining it.
fine, Siddharth. So I'm starting it from the previous thing. Yeah, fine. Shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, fine. So actually, this is a Zeiss IL master report in which you can see it will give the axial length values in both eyes, and also the characterometer values K1 and K2, and the spherical equivalent, which is nothing but the average K values, and how much cylinder the patient is having, the difference between K1 and K2, and it will give at the steep axis it will give, because many of the multifocal lenses or even the toric lenses, whenever they are calculating, they are going with the steep axis. So that's why whenever the biometric reports are there, the cylinder it will be denoted in the steepest axis. It also gives the anterior chamber depth value, and here you can see the status, which is nothing but phakic. In cases where patient will already undergone cataract surgery, in which there will be an option called a pseudophakic status. So before doing the examination, you want to change the status of the eye, whether it is a phakic eye or a pseudophakic eye. But in special cases like a patient who undergone a retinal detachment surgery, whose eye was already filled with a silicone oil, because silicone oil will have a different velocity inside our eye. So whenever the patient they are measuring with either ultrasound or even with a non-contact method, it is necessary to change the status to a silicone oil. And also whenever the patient is injecting a silicone oil, the silicone oil will have different centistrokes. Depends on the centistrokes, the velocity of the silicone oil will differ. Okay, so in that case, how much centistrokes of silicone oil they are having, we can select that mode and then we can proceed our readings. So many of the non-contact method, they will show this kind of errors. If there is a difference in excellent values, or if the values are, if the machine thinks the values are not accurate, then it will show as this warning. So in that condition, in this case, the patient will have some kind of any corneal problem or any kind of a retinal problem. But if you see here, the patient cornea is clear, so that's why you get the keratometer values. And if you see here, this is the signal noise ratio. From right eye to left eye, the signal noise ratio is varying, but the axial length are same. Whenever the patient the signal to noise ratio is higher, the values are more accurate. So if you take in this report, the left eye report was more accurate than the right eye. Here the signal to noise ratio is 177.2. Here it is 106.0. In that case, we can conclude that the right eye is having a dense cataract. Because of the dense cataract, the signal to noise ratio is less. Okay. I'm moving to the next slide. Yeah. So in while calculating this axial length measurement, the importance of accuracy is very, very must, because even a 0.1 mm error in the axial length measurement will end up with a 0.3 diopter of post operative. So this in that condition, if you have a 1 mm error in an axial length measurement, after surgery the patient will end up with a 3 diopter of refractive error. So before calculating the axial length measurement, you want to cross check either 2 or 3 tries whenever you are doing a normal ultrasound A scan. But in cases of a non-contact, it is not advisable to go for a multiple readings. You can go with the two readings. But in case of ultrasound, if you are not getting the accurate values, whenever you are taking a multiple readings, the values keep on changing. Then you want to make the patient to sit and make the eyes little wet, because already I told the corneal tear film plays a role for a keratometer also, and even for a axillary measurement. So make the patient sit their eyes closed, and after a few minutes you can bring them back and take the contact ultrasound method. So these are the standard values of Indian eyes, in which the mean axial length will be lies between 23.45 to 23.55 mm. So and the average corneal thickness of an Indian population is 0.55 micron, which is actually if you want to be in the range, it will be 490 microns to 550 microns. And the mean lens thickness in an Indian population is 4.63 mm, and the mean anterior chamber depth is 3.24. So in axial length measurement, you want to repeat the measurement if the axial length is less than 22 mm and if it is greater than 22 mm. So if the axial length measurement is less than 22 mm, you can expect the patient is having a microphthalmus or nanophthalmus, and a patient will have a high amount of hyperopia in case of lesser axial length. If the patient is having a axial length more than 25 mm, in that case you can expect a high myopia and also retinal disorders. So and also you want to repeat the axial length values if the difference between two eyes, if the right eye is 23.23 and if the left eye is 23.3, you want to repeat the measurement to cross check whether the values are same. And also if in the same eye, if you are taking a reading in the right eye, first time it is giving a 23, and if the second time it is giving a 23.2, also you want to once again repeat the measurement and you want to verify whether the readings are accurate or not. And also you want, as I already told, axial length plays a major role in a refractive error. So if the axial length is very less, if it is less than 22 or if it is greater than 25, you want to repeat the values. And also the patient fixation. So patient fixation is very, very important in cases of taking both contact method or non-contact method. So non-contact method, mostly there will be a light fixation where the patient can see. But in case of dense cataract, even though dense cataract, the patient can't fixate at the light source. In that case, you want to give an external target to fixate, and then you want to take the readings. So this is a summary of the evaluation of the intraocular lenses from the first generation till now. So if you take first, Dr. Ridley was implanted the first PCIOL, which was implanted in between these years, and then comes the anterior chamber lenses, then comes the iris supporter lenses, then intermediate anterior chamber lenses, which is nothing but they will place a lens in between the iris. We call it as an optic capture. In the recent time, we call it as an optic capture because they will the optic will be fixed in the iris. That is intermediate anterior chamber lenses. Then from 1975 only the posterior chamber lens came into the practice. So nowadays many of the lenses are comes in a posterior chamber lenses only. So the advancements in the IOLs are, which is nothing but the haptic designs. So many of the lenses we can change the optic shape or optic design, but we can change the haptic design in such a way that we can the implantation will be very easy, and the patient inside the eye the lens will last for a long time. So the patient, if you take a plate haptic design, the fixation holes they are coming nowadays. They are coming in a larger fashion so that the fibrovascular growth will be there inside the holes, which will hold the lens very tightly. So which will enhance the stability and the fixation. And I already told about the three-piece lens, which is nothing but the optic will be of different material and the haptic will be of different materials. But in this case, the lens centration will be more because the lens haptic it will be maybe on hydrophobic or hydrophilic. So because in that case, it will be more stable. Then I already told about the edging of the lens. So that square edge, which is nothing but the lens, the optic haptic junction, the edging will be of a square shape. So which reduces the migration of epithelial cells to reduce the PCO rate. So, but nowadays many of the lenses are comes in a single piece designs, which is nothing but the optic and the haptic will be of same material. Just a minute, yeah. So which have more coming in the acrylic model, which is nothing. Yes, Siddharth?
Nothing.
Hello?
Yeah, you can proceed. Nothing.
Yeah, fine, Siddharth. And also nowadays the lens manufacturing units. So the lens manufacturers of various countries, they are coming with the injector system. Because previously what happened, the lenses will come in separately. The doctor will have a separate vial for the lenses to inject inside the eye. But nowadays the lens manufacturers are manufacturing their own injectors, IOL injectors, in which the doctor can inject the IOL inside the eye. And also nowadays many kind of multifocal lenses, both in a diffractive platform or refractive platform, they are comes into practice. Then the toric IOLs nowadays they are having a vast experience of doctors who are practicing toric lenses. And also the accommodative IOLs. The problem with the accommodative IOLs are if the patient ciliary body should be very strong, so that the patient will have this. We can implant the accommodative lenses. If the patient's ciliary body is weak, then we can't do a accommodative IOL inside the eye. So as I said, nowadays there are large spectrum of lenses available today, and mostly the IOL choices depends on the surgeon's choice. And also we want to see multiple factors like their occupation, their previous ocular history, like that. Sorry. Oops. Sorry. Okay, this is actually a recommendation. So many of the this whenever we are going for a manual calculation, IOL calculation, these are the recommended formula when the patient's axial length is this much. So if the patient axial length is less than 22 mm, you want to go for an Hoffer-Q formula. And but actually nowadays the patient, the optometrists, they are not calculating anything manually. So many of the online sites are there where you can put the values of keratometer values, axial length, anterior chamber depth, so that you can calculate all the lens diopters online. So many of the optometrists and many of the people, they are following this SRK1 or SRK2. This is nothing but the third generation formulas, which is the most followed formulas worldwide. Whenever the patient axial length is 24 to 26, you want to go for an holiday. The patient whose axial length is more, that is more than 26 mm, in that case you can go for an SRK-T. So mostly after surgery of an post-operative, you want to check for the visual acuity in a post-operative day 1 and day 7 and day 14. So even if you why visual acuity after post-op day 1 is very, very important is that we want to look for whether how much the patient improved after the surgery. If the patient is complaining, if the vision is as the same, then you want to look for the any kind of inflammation or any kind of infection in the operated eye. Then the refraction should be performed after 3 weeks of the surgery. Both subjective and objective refraction should be done. But in cases you want to be very, very careful in doing refraction, because whenever you are doing a refraction in a multifocal implanted patient, mostly in a diffractive lenses, the center part of the IOL will have the near ad. So whenever you are doing a on-axis retinoscope, your retinoscopy value will be wrong. So you want to do a little bit off-axis refraction in cases of a multifocal implanted patient, so that you will end up with the accurate subjective and objective values. Then the dilated fundus examination should be done after 3 months. After 3 weeks of the surgery. And then the contrast sensitivity and the aberrometry is very, very important. Why contrast sensitivity and the aberrometry is important is that many of the cataract patients will have less contrast sensitivity. But whenever the patient is implanting a IOL, after the IOL surgery, if the patient is going for the contrast sensitivity, then you can have an idea how much the contrast is been enhanced, and depends on the IOL material, depends on the positioning of the IOL, the contrast sensitivity also differ. The aberrometry is very important in the cases of refractive lenses. Why? Because the refractive lenses, I already told, it's using the spherical aberration technique to give that extended depth of focus. So in that case, the aberrometry is very, very important to calculate the higher order aberration after the surgery, higher order aberration, and then the offset you can check after the surgery. So in cases of refractive surface, the refractive surface is nothing but after surgery, if the patient is having a lot of refractive error. If you say most of the doctors are they will aim for emetropia, or they will aim for little myopia, because even though if the patient is having a little myop, they will have a good near vision. So in that case, the doctor will plan for a emetrope or a little myop. But after surgery, if you find the patient is having a lot of refractive error, like -2 or even plus side, +2 or +3, in that case, you want to repeat the keratometry values and biometry after cataract surgery to look for any change error in the keratometry value or a biometry value. So I will say that the optometrist part in selecting a patient and proper guidance to the IOL is very, very important. So even though the surgeons surgeons will select the IOLs depend on the patient needs, but the history taking is a major part where the optometrist plays a major role, and also the biometry readings. So these two things, whenever you are in a OPD, you want to ask for a lot of questions regarding their occupation and then the previous Hogler history, so that you can have an idea, okay, you itself have an idea, okay, this patient will get benefited from this kind of IOL, like that. So and also even while doing a biometry, you will have an idea, okay, this patient is having this much myop, so the patient actual length will comes under this range. Okay, so as advancement, I want to discuss two lens product here. Both are comes in a refractive platform. Nowadays, actually, many of the patients are having a lot of computer work. So, company Johnson & Johnson, they come up with the advanced IOL called an iHands. So, this iHands IOL is a monofocal IOL. They call it as a monofocal IOL, but it's actually an intermediate IOL. Actually, it's a difference between two techniques. The techniques is nothing but the Johnson & Johnson. You forget about the brand name, but you just remember this IOL name. This is the iHands IOL, then this is the eyepiece IOL of techniques, in which the iHands IOL, you can see a refractive zone at the center. But in case of eyepiece IOL, there will be nothing will be there. Only they are using a spherical aberration for a even for distance, they are using a spherical aberration here. This is a monofocal, this is a monofocal IOL, and this is a IOL for the intermediate. Here you can see this central refractive zone. This refractive zone will give a diopter of nearly +2. So this +2 diopter of refractive zone will enhance their intermediate vision. So patient who are implanted with this iHands IOL will have a better intermediate vision than the other IOLs. So the patient will have who having a lot of intermediate work, like computer work. Their occupation is very important here. So I am adding who are having a lot of tailoring work, or they can go with this iHands IOL. Sorry. So and also happy to explain about this EDOF IOL, which comes in a progressive optics. So if you see here, this is a mini-well ready IOL, progressive IOL, which will comes with 3 different zones. You can see here there is a one green zone and red zone, and another one is a plain zone. So you can see here 3 different zones. In this green zone will have a positive spherical aberration. This red zone will have a negative spherical aberration. The third zone will have a only monofocal power. So these 2 zones will not have any refractive power, unless because but they are having a spherical aberration value of some microns. So these two positive and negative spherical aberration combine to form this EDOF technology. So here I'll show you a video on this mini-well ready lenses. Here you can see this positive spherical aberration and this is the negative spherical aberration. This is focal points of the positive spherical aberration and this is the focal points of the negative spherical aberration. Sorry, it's not playing. Just a minute. Sorry. Just a minute. We have a continuous number of focus which gives the EDOF technique. Okay, so this afterwards it will be giving the different lens focus only. Sorry, it's keep on closing. Okay, fine.
I think you can play the video separately with the player, I guess, if you have the video.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Just
Just a minute. Yeah. Hello. Siddharth, can you see the video? No?
Yeah, we can. I think you can start
Yeah,
the
fine.
video.
Here, as I already told, this company it comes with a material of copolymer, which I will have both hydrophilic and hydrophobic nature, and also it comes with a 5-degree vaulting. So these lenses it will comes with the injector. So this is the injector of the lens in which this is the vial of the lens inside which the IOL will be there. So the surgeon will inject the viscoelastic inside. So here the lens will be there. here you can see this is actually a multifocal IOL with a refractive optics. Here you can see there will be no diffractive rings. So when a patient who implanted with this lens will have a reduced glare and halos. So the patient will have a better night vision, and they will not have the image jump effect. So as I told, there will be no rings. So there was the photophenomenon at night. I think I can move with the presentation. Okay. So the take-home message of this presentation is actually nowadays there are large spectrum of lenses. So majority of the lenses will be selected by the doctors. So even though the doctor selecting the IOL, the patient selection and then the thorough pre-op examination will be in the optometrist hands. So whenever we are doing a biometry, or whenever we are taking a history to a patient, so whenever who are coming for a cataract surgery, the things which we want to mainly focus on there is their occupation, their previous ocular history, and also the accuracy of their biometry readings. And I think it's also very important to know about the steps in a cataract surgery, because nowadays many of the optometrists, after finishing their college, many of the optometrists like me, they are being a part in a MNC. Even though in a college days we are exposed to OT, but we are not correctly know what are the steps involving in a cataract surgery. So I am slightly touch upon the steps in a cataract surgery also. So the first steps in a cataract surgery, after applying the local anesthesia, everything, the doctor will make the incision. There will be two incision, which is nothing but a side port and a main port. Through this main port only, the doctor will inject the IOL inside the eye. The side port is nothing but they will inject some cannulas, which will help the doctor to do the phaco techniques. After doing the incision, the doctor will inject the viscoelastic to make the anterior chamber strong, so that the endothelial loss, corneal endothelial loss will be not there, and also it will always keeps the eye with the proper shape. After injecting the viscoelastic, the doctor will do the capsular hesis. So capsular hesis is nothing but the doctor will tear off the anterior lens capsule, so that the doctor can cut off the cataracts. That is nothing, which is nothing but the nucleus of the cataract. So after that, the doctor will do the hydrodissection. So after doing the capsular hesis, the doctor will inject pure saline inside the capsular bag, so which separates the nucleus from the cortex, so that the nucleus will start rotating inside the cortex bag. So for doing surgery, it is a very easy for the doctors. So after hydrodissection, the doctor will do the phacoemulsification, where the doctor will cut the nucleus of the cataract, each into bits and pieces, and after chopping the cataract, the doctor will start aspirating. Aspiration is nothing but slowly it will, with the help of vacuum, it clears the cataract from inside the eye. After which the IOL implantation happens through the main port. So after doing the IOL implantation, it is very important to remove the viscoelastic which was injected at the first, because viscoelastics are mean to inject for a clear view of the lens or clear view of the cornea during the surgery. So viscoelastics are very hydrophilic in nature, so that whenever if you miss few viscoelastic inside the bag after cataract surgery, it will end up with a PCO. After within 1 week time, patient who are having viscoelastic inside the bag, they develop PCO. So removal of viscoelastic is very important after injecting a IOL. And after a removal of viscoelastic, the doctor will seal the wound, which is nothing but the side port and main port, with the help of a saline and also with the antibiotics. I also wish to show you this video, so that you can have an idea how the phacoemulsification works. This is a surgery by a doctor from MNI Hospital, Chennai.
This is a case of great corneal cataract and corneal emulsification with a minimal enhancement of focus intraocular lens. By now, side port entries are made.
This is a side port, two side ports the doctor made.
Viscoelastic is injected in chamber.
This is the viscoelastic. I told it was injected in the anterior chamber.
Capsular X is initiated.
This is the capsular
Because
hesis.
we plan for trifocal intraocular lens, it's always important to get an adequate sized lens of 5.5 millimeter. The final pull of the flap should be towards the center to get a round and even lenses.
So this is the main port.
Now using the 2.8 millimeter keratome, a corneal incision is made in the anterior chamber. Hydrodissection is done until the anterior lens capsule, and you can see the fluid wave going towards the opposite folder.
This is the hydrodissection method. So many of the doctors they will use this method to differentiate the nucleus from the cortex. So after injecting this water inside the capsular bag, the nucleus will get differentiated from the cortex, so that the surgery will be very easy for the doctors. So here,
So one more stretching is now initiated.
this is the phaco method, in which the doctor is cutting the lens into two parts.
Separation backing can then be done by placing both the instruments at the bottom of the trench and then splitting them.
So the doctor is splitting the lens nucleus into two different parts, so that
This
the
is rotated, and then the same is done on the opposite side as well. As you can see, this is a relatively soft nucleus. In the phaco tube mode, using very minimal power, the phaco probe is slightly buried, and the job is then done. In such cataracts, it's always better to use low power and high vacuum settings. As you can see, the anterior chamber is well formed, and very good followability is noted. After rotating the nucleus 180 degrees, while initiating the back, there is a difficulty which is encountered while holding it, as it is a soft cataract. This is one of the commonest problems faced in soft nucleuses. So we can use a second instrument to guide the nucleus in the anterior chamber and then proceed with the phacoemulsification. Bimanual irrigation aspiration is then initiated for the removal of the cortical fibers. Such cases usually have the nuclear sheath, so we can actually remove the anteriorly cortical fibers and then aspirate so that the nuclear sheath comes out along with. The removal of the cortical fibers should be done in a circular fashion. To remove the subincisional cortex, it's always better to switch hands with the bimanual irrigation aspiration can. This can then be conveniently stripped and aspirated.
போயிட்டு இருக்கா இப்போ செஷன் போயிட்டு இருக்கா என்னது
Under irrigation, the beam will enhance depth of focus intraocular lens is injected into the capsular bag. The beam will enhance depth of focus.
You can see here, after implanting the lens, the doctor will show you the diffractor, the refractive zones very clearly inside the eye.
This intraocular lens is based on a patented innovation which makes one continuous extended focus for sharp vision from far to near, going beyond what is currently possible with multifocal IOLs. The depth of focus is created by inducing targeted amounts of spherical aberration in concentric optical zones, generating a longitudinally extended continuous focal point. You can appreciate the concentric zones instead of the rings is responsible for the reduced glare and halos. The IOL is a biconvex multi-feature
It's already I explained to you.
IOLs with pinboards.
So this is a
Are then hydrated.
hydrator. They will seal the wound.
As you can see, there's a uniform 0.5 millimeter overlap of the anterior capsular margins, which can reduce the incidence of PCO. Readings posted of picture showing the clear cornea and a well-set of the lens in the back. This is the 1B poster picture of the same eye.
Here you can see the patient is having a good distance and near vision. So following the surgery. So here many of the doctors, some IOL, even though the patient IOLs are multifocals, in some IOLs the patient will have a poor near vision. But whenever the patient is going for these kind of refractive IOLs, the near vision will be very very good in cases of refractive IOLs than the refractive IOLs.
After bilateral implantation of the lens in both eyes, each of the achieved an contribution of 6,686 both eyes.
Yeah. So this is about the cataract surgery. So whenever whenever you are going for the clinics or after your college days, whenever you are joining in a hospital as an optometrist, you want to very keen on these steps so that because many of the hospitals will work under a ophthalmologist, so it will be very useful for you to know about the steps in the cataract surgery. And stay home, stay safe. Thank you all. That
Any doubts, students? Okay, I just have a question to ask so that we can
just a minute, Siddharth, just a minute. You can ask now.
It is like we have both IR based and ultrasound based scanners for measuring axial length. So it is like it would be better which one though we found that it is like IR based gives you more accurate results. It is like it is not being widely used and we have few limitations. I think we can just discuss on those once we reconnect, because we have less than a minute again to discuss on it. So I think you can just give those points and then we can just ask for others to come up with other questions if they have any doubts and the designs and etc. So
Definitely I'll do that. So in the next session I will mostly do a session on only on the biometry reports and also the biometer, different types of biometers.
yeah, that would be great then. This is like, but I think you can just finish up this alone and then we can just
Fine, Siddharth. So that's the thing. So if in case of they are having any doubts,
so that we can just
okay,
connect, ask for doubts and then we can have a discussion on doubts. So
okay, Siddharth.
I think we'll just wait for it to close it down so that we can reconnect again. So guys, everyone please reconnect so that we'll have a discussion on few aspects of today's presentation. Anand, I think people are joining. We can just wait for 30 minutes or a minute, and then we can start our discussion again. And then I think it won't extend for more than 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can just finish it up.
Actually, from my end, there is nothing to share more, Siddharth. If people they are having any doubts, I'm free to answer their questions.
Okay, this is
Or
a
if
good
you
question. I think we can just have this discussion. Just why IR based is not that familiarly used when compared with ultrasound. Yes, can I mean?
Yeah, so actually, Siddharth, you as an optometrist, you also know that many of the hospitals here they are trust oriented, and many of the hospitals they are run with the funds from the external sources. So you have many of the corporate hospitals they are having the IR based setup, but the hospitals with the few this kind of trust oriented hospitals they are with the ultrasound biometers, because ultrasound biometers are way cost less than the IR based biometers,
Hmm.
and the IR based biometers are very costly.
Hmm.
So that in that case, the doctor mostly they will go with these ultrasound biometers. And ultrasound biometers, many of the old doctors, I think the doctors who are practicing more than 40 or 50 years, they will go with this ultrasound more than this IR based, because they are get used to the ultrasound based biometer, and they think that will be more reliable. But the trend now was many of the doctors they are using only the IR based biometers.
Okay.
Okay, so but my point was they can use both IR based biometers and also the ultrasound based. But whenever they are doing ultrasound based biometers, the values should be more accurate, so that the IOL power will be very accurate. So if there is any chance, if the biometer values have any kind of mistake or error, then the patient will end up with refractive error, or a patient will be not satisfied with the IOL.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I think that was a very good session. So can we have any doubts if you have anything? So you can put it in the chat box as well, so we can discuss anything.
Yeah, people feel free to ask questions, so no issues.
So okay,
Or if you want to take any sessions on any particular topic, you can do that also, so that myself or Siddharth we can plan for one more session on that.
okay, I think as we discussed before, I think we can do a session on biometry again, so that people
Yeah, sure,
everyone
Siddharth.
will
That I
be
will do.
clear with what they exactly want to do with when they see a patient. Okay, so and it is like thank you, Mr. Anand, for come agreeing in a short span. And it is like I think you are the appropriate person to explain all the lens design, because you are in the designing aspect of IOL and its clinical outcome. I think you are the only one who can explain all these aspects uh, uh, when it comes to IOL and surgery. And thank you for your time. And we are happy to have you again with another topic. And thank you.
Sure, definitely I will do that. Definitely I will do that. We soon we will come up with a new session on biometers. I think students, I think you can also come up with few questions on biometer. What are the doubts you are having, and not only on biometers. If you have any doubts on any glaucoma related questions, also you can come up with, so that I can answer to those questions also.
Okay. Okay then.
Yeah, fine, Siddharth.
Okay. Thank you, Anand. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, students. Bye.
Thank you, sir.